Hello and welcome to San Diego Design Week. I'm Agota. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a designer, a biomimic, and a teacher. This year, San Diego Design Week is centered around the theme of inspiration, so I've brought a couple of stories I would love to share with you. What these stories have in common is inspiration, of course, and in all of these, we will see how people were inspired by nature and how it influenced their work. Some happened to come upon unique new ways to do a function, some were actively searching for new solutions, but all found answers in the natural world. In this short presentation, we will quickly review the meaning of the word inspiration. We will go over the basics of biomimicry and why it is essential to learn from nature now when our world is in trouble. Then, on an imaginary hike, we will hear from 3 species that inspired designers and engineers while teaching them new insights that they could use in their work in building a better and safer world. As you know, our beautiful planet is facing a crisis. Rising temperatures, unquenchable forest fires, droughts, soil degradation, loss of species, rising ocean levels, dangerous levels of ocean acidification, and more. There's so much bad news that it's painful to listen and comprehend, but there's also good news in the world. There is hope. We all agree, for example, on what we want: good health, clean, safe drinking water, more fish in our rivers, and healthy soil to grow nutritious food. If we all do our part, I believe that we can turn the tide. We are all parts of an extensive, complex network, just like everything else in nature. We can't ignore how we are connected to the soil, for example. If we don't treat it well, we will lose our way of growing our food and might lose our health. Soil health, animal health, and human health will all suffer. Also, the atmosphere is connected to the biosphere. There's no sense in separating the two. When one is in crisis, the other is too. Our life depends on this interconnection. Can you think of another example of this connectedness? Indigenous people understand this and see themselves as a continuation of life, holding space right between the ancestors from many generations ago and the great-grandchildren yet to be born. I live on the beautiful land of the Hasheman Nation. This land has been taken care of and observed by the Hasheman since the beginning of time. Archaeological evidence shows a Hasheman presence here for over 10,000 years. There's much wisdom that we could learn from indigenous people who are not only faithfully listening to nature, but for thousands of years were the caretakers and observational scientists of the land, and who were aware that nature, life constantly cycles and regenerates. Native Americans lived in perfect alignment with nature or biology, the living environment, instead of fighting it tooth and nail every step of the way, like we modern folks are doing. Also, I'm inspired by the Hashimans' beautiful reciprocity that they lived in with nature. They understand how life works. You receive and then you give back. If you take care of the land will take good care of you. You don't harvest more than you need. You leave a little behind. When you are part of a gift economy like this, relationships are highly valued, and so you give back more than what you take because your rights come with responsibility. Looking at our ancestors and nature for inspiration and seeing the harm we have done, we must find our way back to connectedness, and this time give more than we take. We have much work to do as the climate crisis is already happening. Regeneration is the work to restore our soil, grassland, and rivers, and the same is true for our relationships, our society, and our hope. I work with design students who are preparing to go out into the world and contribute to the work of creating a better future. The stories that I brought today are stories that inspire us to learn from nature and the species that have come before us to design and make our world in a smarter, gentler, and safer way. But first things first, let's start with a quick review of some vocabulary. The theme is inspiration. What does it mean to be an inspiration or to be inspired? According to the dictionary, inspiration, the noun, is either the process of being mentally stimulated to do something, especially something creative, or a sudden, brilliant, creative, or timely idea. Indeed, inspiration has both of those elements, right? It comes with a feeling of being pushed to create something great, and it can come out of nowhere, revealing a new and unique solution for something we have been challenged by. The verb to inspire is interesting. First, it means filling someone with the urge or ability to do something, especially something creative. It is similar to the word stimulate or motivate. And inspire has another surprising meaning. You no doubt remember from school that in biology, the word respiration means breathing. Breathing has two phases: inspiration or inhalation, which means we take air into our lungs, and expiration or exhalation, which is the opposite. It means we let the air out. So, inspiration also means to inhale. When I think of how important it is to breathe and that we feel alive with every breath of fresh air, I can't help but make the connection that when we are inspired by something that urges us to act, we also might feel alive. This brings into mind another term, awe-inspiring. What is awe-inspiring? Have you experienced this feeling? According to the dictionary, awe-inspiring, an adjective, means something is arousing through being impressive or magnificent. The sense of awe is what we get in the presence of something vast that challenges our understanding, like looking up at the stars at night or looking around from a snow-covered mountaintop while the sunlight makes everything glitter and shine. So, awe is related to wonder. Rachel Carson thought that we could use a little more wonder in our lives. She wrote in her book titled The Sense of Wonder that if she could wish for just one thing for all newborn children in the world, it would be that they receive a sense of wonder as a gift to last throughout their lives. She encouraged her readers to consciously cultivate habits of awe and discover nature with their curious young children. She asked that we pay attention to nature's cycles, mysteries, and beauties. We look too hastily, she said. People everywhere are desperately eager for whatever will lift them out of themselves and allow them to believe in the future. Brené Brown says that awe and wonder are essential to the human experience because they fuel our passion for exploration, curiosity, and learning. So then, wonder and inspiration are part of the creation and design process. And when we are being inspired by nature, it's like Mother Nature is nudging us to reconnect. Everywhere we look in the natural world, there's brilliance, says Janine Benyus. In 1997, she wrote her famous, beautiful book Biomimicry and used the word inspired in its subtitle, Innovations Inspired by Nature. This is not a coincidence. So, what exactly is biomimicry, and why is it essential that we pay attention to it today? You might have heard the word biophilia before. Biophilia means love of life. Biophilia is when we surround ourselves with elements of the natural world or decorate our homes with beautiful natural materials. We let in plenty of natural light and hang pieces of art that remind us of nature. E.O. Wilson coined this term in the 1980s. He was a famous biologist naturalist, and writer who was the world's leading expert on ants. Biomimicry is like biophilia, but it has a different purpose. It's about imitating life. Bio means life, and mimicry means to imitate. Biomimicry focuses on functions we humans are also working on in our design challenges. These functions can be observed in nature. When you see that we are one with nature, we are an integral part of it, you can then easily understand that other species face the same exact hardships and experiences that we do too. Biologists bring knowledge and scientific data to the design table, and designers can learn from and mimic the strategies used by other species. Nature has had 3.8 billion years of research and development, resulting in ingenious design solutions. It's a movement today, a design discipline, and a branch of science in which we create innovative designs while looking to nature as a model and mentor. You can take nature's genius designs and emulate them to develop new products, buildings, or businesses. Life all around you can provide you with examples of sustainable innovations. Isn't it fascinating, for example, to realize that animals and plants manufacture materials too? Animals don't rely on very high temperatures and don't use added chemicals that would harm other creatures near and far. The beautiful fibers on plants, the chitin on the back of a beetle are awesome, smart materials that were made on the creatures' bodies. Isn't that amazing? Biomimicry prompts us to ask, how does nature do the things that it does? If regeneration is our work and challenge today, can we ask, how does nature do this function, regeneration? Maybe nature can show us how ecosystems keep bouncing back, how species create conditions for life for many future generations. So the challenge is to shift our point of view and go from our usual learning about nature to start learning from nature. So, going forward, is it possible for us to learn from millions of years of adaptation? Can we combine this new knowledge from nature with indigenous wisdom and practice from our human ancestors? Will this help shape a new generation of designers to create conditions conducive to all life on Earth? I promised you stories of designers who were inspired by nature, so here we go. Let's say it's the end of summer. Let's imagine that we are hiking on the beautiful sunny slopes of San Diego. At one point, you look down, and on your shoes and around the edges of your pants, you notice tiny hitchhikers from the trails. They are little round burrs that stick so well, it's really hard to remove them. In 1941, a Swiss engineer, George de Mestral, became curious about these very same pesky burrs that he kept finding clinging to his trousers and his dog at the end of many of their mountain hikes. So he decided to find out what made the burrs stick so well. A burr is a small spiky seed that likes to travel far and wide by attaching itself to an unsuspecting furry animal. When George de Mestral looked into his microscope, at the ends of all the short needles of the burr, he saw round-shaped hooks that appeared strong and indeed perfect in attaching to fur or fabric. And this sparked an idea. How about a new type of fastener that mimics the structure of this clever, clingy seed? He set out to create the two necessary components. One part that contains curvy, round hooks, and another one that replicates the dog hair. It took about 8 years of research and development as he worked with a weaver in France. But in the end, he could reproduce them. These two humble components, Two strips of fabric, neatly stuck together, became a well-working fastener. He appropriately named his new product Loop and Hook, or Vel-Cro, from velours and crochet. He was ready to start his company in 1959. Today, Velcro is such an integrated and expected part of our daily activities that we could hardly imagine our lives without it. We can say that it has revolutionized the fastener industry. On our imaginary hike, let's now look towards the ocean. Although we can't see the creatures living underwater, we know that there are many different beautiful species of fish that make this area their home. One of the most ancient species that has lived here the longest is a truly awe-inspiring creature. Do you know which animal I'm thinking of? Yes, it's the shark. Have you ever been lucky enough to stroke the back of a shark? If yes, you might have noticed that it feels pretty smooth in one direction, but in the opposite direction it feels rough like sandpaper. This difference in texture is because most shark species have microscopic overlapping scales covering their skin. These scales are tooth-like and they are called denticles. They protect the animal by discouraging the growth of parasites like barnacles and protect from scrapes from sharp rocks. The exact shape of these denticles varies throughout different species. The fastest hunting sharks, such as the great white shark, have fine raised ridges along their scales. These ridges are a couple of micrometers high, but they all run longitudinally along the shark's entire body. It turns out these tiny 3D texture details are great at reducing drag while the shark swims. So, while using the same amount of energy, he moves faster. And for this reason, engineers and biologists have been studying this unique and functional 3D surface texture. I know it's hard to believe, but they have applied it to airplanes, ships, swimsuits, and hospital surfaces. When it comes to airplanes, it's all about reducing friction and saving fuel. Friction might be reduced by 8%. A polymer coating is now available that can be applied to the curving surfaces of an aircraft before a 3D riblet texture is impressed into it. When it comes to ships in water, it's also about improving speed and reducing cost. But there's a very annoying problem here. Barnacles, algae, and other creatures sticking to the bottom of these boats. They create unnecessary drag. When researchers apply the riblet scales onto the otherwise smooth surfaces, there's a 60% reduction in barnacle growth. Incredible, isn't it? In 2000, a new material was introduced at the Sydney Summer Olympics called Fast Skin. Yes, it was created using tiny ridges that imitated shark skin denticles. It worked so well that 83% of Olympic medals went to swimmers wearing this material. They must have been swimming like sharks. And, of course, in 2010, this material was banned from being used in future competitions. Sharks can remain exceptionally clean because of this same 3D microtexture offered by the tentacles, and that's a wonderful benefit that we can also use in environments where dangerous bacteria can grow, for example in hospital buildings. California-based Sharklet Technologies has created a thin film that can be applied to different surfaces like doors, walls, or bed frames. It's a ribbed, 3D printed, textured surface that makes it much harder for potentially dangerous microorganisms to settle down and grow. Let's continue our imaginary hike, but let's walk out to the beaches this time. Let's go visit some tide pools. There we will maybe see some sea anemones, sea stars, sea urchins, crabs, small fish like sculpin or opal eyes, maybe some mussels. Some creatures will get away as soon as we show up. They will swim under a rock or scoot into a crevice, but some, like the mussels, will stay, and so we can observe them easily. And this next story of inspiration is about the incredible humble mussel. But wait, because we need to start with coral reefs. Coral reefs provide habitat for 25% of all marine species and offer protection for coastal infrastructure. Unfortunately, climate change and pollution is killing off corals. Within the next 30 years, we might lose 90% of all reefs, according to scientists. In some incredible reef restoration efforts to save this ecosystem, broken coral segments or corals grown in nurseries are reattached back to the reefs, piece by piece, with cement, zip ties, and nails. Lately, glue might be used, but glue can be toxic to sea life, and as we all know, it doesn't work well underwater. So, what to do? Well, in the meanwhile, right here, off the California coast, scientists were surprised to see how well mussels can hold on to rocks and each other too, even in stormy conditions. And it turns out that they make their own glue. They use some amazing proteins to create this material that bonds perfectly underwater. Muscle Polymers Inc. recently developed a type of non-toxic adhesive that mimics this protein and that works even on corals. A glue inspired by the humble mussel is coming to the rescue to help our restoration efforts. Mussels, by the way, are filter-feeding bivalves. Filter feeding means that to take in food particles from the water, they have to strain the water through their bodies and separate out the edible parts, nutritious food like plankton. Since ocean waters are not super clean today, unfortunately, they might also take in and filter out other pollutants that are not edible, like microscopic plastic particles. Still, they go on filtering and cleaning the water around themselves. As we are trying to figure out how to give back and regenerate our environment, maybe all we need to do is look at these incredible creatures like the humble mussel and learn from them. Thank you so much for hanging out and going on an imaginary hike with me. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about these amazing creatures and that I inspired you to reconnect with nature. Thank you, San Diego Design Week, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you, bird seeds, sharks, and mussels, for sharing your wisdom with us and showing the way.